The presidential primary will take a backseat to parties and parades in 2 Alabama counties. Super Tuesday, February 5th, also happens to be Fat Tuesday, the day that thousands celebrate Mardi Gras along the Gulf Coast. State legislators in Alabama didn't add that all up. They didn't realize they had a conflict until the primary had already been moved. So down in Baldwin and Mobile counties, they've decided to vote on Wednesday, 6 days before the actual primary. And as someone who was once a reporter in the city of Mobile, let me just say to all the Mobilians who might be watching, moon pie, moon pie, moon pie. You'll know what I'm talking about if you're from Mobile. Now, from the Palmetto State to the Sunshine State, pollsters are already lining up to call the races even before voters head out to vote. So what do you do when you crunch the latest poll numbers? Joining us now to explain all this is Democratic pollster Bernard Whitman. Bernard, thanks for joining us. We had planned to have another pollster with us. Apparently we're having some problems with that satellite shot, so you're going to have to put on both hats, okay?
I'll do my best, Brian.
Now,
thanks so much for having me today.
We're all trying to be fair and balanced here. Now, as you look at these numbers, the one thing that just comes to my mind is that there's so much volatility in the numbers. I can't recall another campaign cycle where we've seen so much movement in the polls. Do you agree or disagree with that assessment?
Well, Brian, I absolutely would agree, and I'll tell you, it's a fascinating time to be a pollster. And, of course, you know, we've heard a lot about the difficulty in measuring the race, particularly on the Democratic side. And we've seen, you know, for many, many years, when we have an African-American candidate, that does introduce some difficulty. I ran into that polling for Giuliani and Dickens here. We've seen it in California and Virginia. But I think even a greater challenge than that has to do with the availability of information today, the 24-hour news cycle, the internet, and not only voters but operatives on the ground have so much access to this information that unless you are polling at that exact moment, you can miss something. And I think that's what happened in New Hampshire when the campaigns and the media outlets stopped polling on Sunday and failed to pick up the full impact of what was going on with Hillary at that time. And it's quite interesting if you look at the trend lines between the New Hampshire polls and the South Carolina polls, you'll see this dramatic drop in Hillary's support and a huge increase in support for Obama matches almost exactly what happened in New Hampshire is what's happening in South Carolina.
Well, let me add, do you think there are going to be any surprises when the votes are counted in South Carolina tonight? Do you think that we're going to see anything that shocks us based on what we've seen going into this, the polls going into this election?
Well, I wouldn't say shock, but I will say if Obama manages a victory in the single digits, I think that is ultimately going to be a victory for Hillary because the polls have consistently showed him to be about 15 points ahead. And if she pulls within single digits, I would say that would be a great victory for her campaign.
And let me just ask you, as someone who knows a bit about Democratic Party politics, for John Edwards, if he doesn't pull off some kind of miracle win here, can you, in your own mind, see a pathway to victory?
Well, I think the victory for John Edwards is going to be his potential role as kingmaker. And while I think that he might stay on, I think he'll certainly stay on through Super Tuesday. What happens after February 5th remains up in the air, but he has got a fair number of delegates, and he will secure a fair number of delegates after Super Tuesday, and he could be in the position to push support one way or another. So I think while Edwards' shot at the presidency is over, his ability to influence who ultimately gets a nomination and who's on that ticket is still quite large.
We're going to be talking about that very point a little bit later in this broadcast. Thank you very much, Bernard. We appreciate you joining us here on